Morning, everybody. So this week, and for the next 2 weeks, we're going to be looking at Sir Gawain the Green Knight, an anonymous late 14th century English poem. Here's the copy of the paperback edition that I've ordered for us, although I also have made PDFs of it available. So this is an anonymous 14th century English poem written at the same time, roughly, during which Geoffrey Chaucer was writing Middle English poetry in London. Chaucer's poetry, which you guys maybe have run into in other classes, is actually much easier to read than the original West Midlands dialect of the poet of Sir Gawain. The version that we will be reading together is a translation made by J.R.R. Tolkien sometime around 1950. We don't have an exact date of this translation. It was later published after his death in 1973 by his son. And I gave you a little bit of the introduction that Christopher Tolkien, J.R.R. Tolkien's son, includes for the publication of this book. What is especially interesting about Sir Gawain from our point of view is the way in which this particular version of the chivalric hero has, is subject to these different kinds of interpretations and meanings. He's quite a different sort of a hero from the kind of Sir Lancelot, the knight who survives mainly by being the best fighter and the best and most courageous, combat soldier. Sir Gawain is brave, but he's also sophisticated in different ways. And what I thought we would start by looking at are the three different versions of the hero that we see in the materials that I've given you so far. So the version that appears on the cover of this book, which is clearly designed, if you look at the translator's name in huge letters, is clearly designed to cash in on the popularity of the Lord of the Rings books and Hobbit. The version that Tolkien himself describes, this is the version of the poet in his introductory remarks, in which he describes the poet as someone who is, I'm going to just get to this passage in a second, someone who is serious and devout, a knowledge of theology, although it's an amateur, not a professional knowledge. In other words, Tolkien does not believe that the author is an ordained cleric, as many authors from this period were, and he knows Latin and French and is fairly well read in what Tolkien calls French books, by which he means things like Marie de France's Lays and other chivalric stories that mainly circulated in French language manuscripts, both in France and in England during this period. And then the third kind of not yet available version of Sir Gawain is this movie that is coming out this summer with Dev Patel playing the hero, playing Sir Gawain himself. And it's really kind of something that we medieval English literature geeks have been waiting for a long time. It was supposed to come out, I think, early spring of 2020. It got pushed because of the pandemic, and then pushed again into, I believe it's now supposed to come out in summer of 2021. But I did put a clip of the trailer up for you. We can talk a little bit about how they are framing it. It's a couple of interesting choices, I think, in that trailer. Two quick things about the papers, and this is in response also to the really nice work you guys did last week on the discussion threads and in the quizzes. The first is just a kind of refrain on some of these, was talking about J.K. Rowling as a kid's author, and using that as a way to I think, step back from interpreting things like the marriage of Remus and Tonks, and other sort of what I suppose we might call adult sexual content. Like, it's true, it's absolutely true. These are written for kids, marketed to children, extremely popular with kids, including, I suspect, some of you when you were kids. But that doesn't mean that we as adults can't interpret them. I think that we should, give ourselves license to think that Rowling is a grown-up. Rowling is thinking about how she presents romantic and sexual content in these books, and we should sort of give her the credit that she deserves to be interpreted and taken seriously. Saying, "Oh, they're children's books, like we don't have to think about that kind of thing," I think is letting us off the hook and letting Rowling off the hook. Speaking of letting Rowling off the hook, the other thing that sometimes we see, and this is especially true when we have a living author who is working so hard to police her own work, is, she says it has to mean this thing. We don't have to listen to the author. And I think some of you already understand this, and there's been a lot of conflict between J.K. Rowling and the fans of the Harry Potter universe. And from the point of view of literature class and interpreters of literature, that is perfectly appropriate. Once the text is written, it can be interpreted by anyone who reads it and thinks about it. It is not the sole possession of its sole interpretive or intellectual possession of the author. We can say what we think Harry Potter means. J.K. Rowling has no greater ownership. I mean, she has a financial stake in the representations. Like, she makes money from the books, she makes money from the movies. Um, but in terms of like making an interpretation of what, for example, Remus Lupin's lycanthropy means, that we can say it with just as much clarity and claim to accuracy as she can, assuming we offer textual proof and a reasoned argument. In practice, I think that the statements by the author can be interesting, but we should not feel bound or constrained by them in any way. All right, look forward to talking to you guys about Sir Gawain for the next couple of weeks, and talk to you soon.